This is a solubility curve for KNO3. Always make sure you look at the axis first. Notice that the bottom one is degrees Celsius, and notice that it's increasing in this direction. So room temperature would be somewhere around here, like 25 degrees Celsius. And of course, this is the temperature at which water boils. And then if we look at the y-axis, now this is a little bit different. First of all, we have 100 milliliters of water. Remember, 1 milliliter equals 1 gram. So that's the same thing as saying 100 grams of water. So we've got a beaker, and in that beaker, it's not a good beaker, we've got 100 grams of water already. And then these numbers here on the y-axis tell us how much of KNO3 we can add, and we can see whether it'll be unsaturated, saturated, or supersaturated, or if it has to be supersaturated for it to be existing that way. So let's take 50. I've already got that marked on the map. For 50 grams of KNO3 to be dissolved in 100 grams of water, the temperature has to be, maybe it's like 33 or 34 degrees Celsius. For 150 grams, if I want to know at what temperature it will be saturated, meaning every little bit will be dissolved up, I go all the way over right here and I look down, and so that's maybe 70, so maybe it's like 75 is where that one's going to be saturated. Now, the questions aren't just about whether or not you're on the line. The questions are also about whether or not you're unsaturated or supersaturated. So if we go back to this 50 right here, and we know at this temperature, this 37 degrees, if we know that 50 grams will be dissolved, well, what if we had put 40 grams in? Well, it'd be like right here. 40 grams would mean that it would look like this. Remember that when something is completely dissolved, you don't actually... if you're unsaturated, it means that you've got room for more to dissolve. And that's what we know. We can put up to 10 more grams before it'll be completely dissolved. And so in unsaturated solution, you don't see any solid on the bottom of it. However, if we were to put 60 grams in at this temperature right here, all of a sudden we know that 50 will go in, so there'll be a whole lot swimming around in that water, but we'll have a little pile of solid at the bottom. And that's called saturated. Now, well, it was actually saturated at 50. Any amount over 50 is, if it were to dissolve, is considered supersaturated. You have to do special things to make things supersaturated. They don't tend to stay that way. They're unstable-ish. So we're really paying attention to the line, but we're also paying attention to what's above and below the line. So just try to think of below the line is unsaturated, means that there's no solid at the bottom, and above the line is supersaturated. You'll also get questions like, if 50% by weight is dissolved, what temperature, what max temperature will all of it just barely be dissolved? Well, 50% by weight is the same thing as saying 50 grams of solute over 100 grams of solution. It's the same thing, times 100%. So we're still asking the same question. What's the max temperature that all that will dissolve at? Well, we've already answered it. It's 37. So that's another format that you can see these answers in. They do have these solubility charts with different units, so make sure you're paying attention to the units. But they kind of are representing percent mass as well as just this look to them right here. So don't be surprised if you ever get a chart that has lots of lines on it, because book manufacturers want to save space and people get tired of searching and searching through pages and pages of these charts. So this is an example of something that you might see, right? And you just have to look for the line that you're needing. So for example, we were just looking at KNO3. That's this line. We pretend the rest of the lines aren't there, and we know that this region is the unsaturated, and that this region is the saturated, and on the line is the supersaturated. if we jump to something else, like this line over here, we ignore everything else and we know that this is the unsaturated and everything above is the supersaturated and on the line is the saturated. So don't let it throw if you see multiple lines. You just ignore the line that you're not looking at, or multiple curves. You ignore the one you're not looking at.